right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining the Add-ons community meeting on February 24th. Looks like we've got a lot of folks here today. We've got Shane, Jorge, and Andreas from the Mozilla staff side, and we've got Sylvain, our longtime add-on reviewer, developer, and general rock star in the add-ons community. I'd just like to acknowledge a really great contribution that happened within the last week. Big thanks to Manish Aradwad. I apologize if I've mispronounced that name. We filed an issue to update the Get This Add-on button that we offer for developers to download and throw up on their web property or anywhere else that they have that'll link them to their AMO extension page or their XPI file for people to download. And Manish updated the icon or the button, and that's really awesome. So thank you, Manish. We're going to be making that button available on Extension Workshop pretty soon. Right now, it's available on an old blog post on the add-ons blog. So we're just going to try to make that a little bit easier to find for folks. Okay, I had a short discussion list for today, and I was actually kind of hoping that Jorge and Andreas might be able to pop in and just talk a little bit about what's going on in their areas currently. So the first thing that I wanted to say was just a bit of administrivia. So Mozilla's Matrix instance is now open to the public and officially launched. So we are now migrating all public conversations over to Matrix. So we've got one big add-ons channel right now on the Matrix instance. It's called Add-ons. We've also got the add-on reviewers channel up and running over there, and that we're keeping it, and then an AMO channel for AMO development. So those are our three public channels on Matrix. I'm going to be emailing all of the add-on reviewers who I believe should be up and running on Matrix at this point, but I'm just going to confirm with them that we are now going forward sending developers to Matrix instead of to IRC. The IRC deprecation, or the date that we drop support for IRC, is still set for March 1st. So that's on Sunday. So we'll be shutting that down pretty soon. The other thing is that I've tried to update our documentation to point developers to go to Matrix. If you see any outstanding links to IRC on any of the Mozilla properties, please feel free to let me know, or feel free to update it yourself. We just want to make sure that folks are finding the right place. The second thing that I wanted to mention was a little bit of old news. Web extension support for Phoenix is still coming along. uBlock Origin is available right now. And then just to let everybody know, last week in the add-ons show and tell meeting, Luca demoed a new thing for WebEx. So you can use WebEx Run now to test how your extension behaves in Phoenix, which is pretty rad. So you used to be able to do it for the old Firefox for Android. Now you can test it out with the new Firefox for Android. Amongst the staff, we're still deciding how broad extension support should be in Phoenix. Probably won't have a decision on that for another couple of months. But in the meantime, feel free to go ahead and test out how your extension works on the new Firefox for Android. So we're pretty excited about that. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to Jorge about the AMO CAPTCHA and any other kind of like news and excitement from the AMO side.
Sure. So the CAPTCHA was a small fix that landed about 2 weeks ago. So we had this problem that we're using reCAPTCHA for when a developer submits their first extension. It's just a spam control barrier there. And the problem is that because it's a Google service and Google is blocked, and well, some Google services are blocked in China and a couple other countries. We had some issues filed with people in China saying, like we can't use this. And they would need to resort to things like VPNs or other bypasses to try to submit their extensions. So Matt from the engineering team looked into possible solutions, and there's a recommendation to use recap. Well, basically, if reCAPTCHA is blocked in your country, there's like an alternative domain that you can use to basically expose the same CAPTCHA from reCAPTCHA, but without going through Google. So apparently that works. That was the fix that was implemented a couple of weeks ago. We haven't, it's really hard to test because we don't, well, basically because you have to be in China to actually test it. So we haven't verified that the fix works. I did post in the, there was a discourse thread about it, and I'm waiting to see if anyone chimes in from China and see if it's actually working. But it should work, but we'll see.
Cool.
As for the other stuff that I'm working on, so I am trying to solidify our Q2 plan. That's still, there are still a number of things that are in motion for that. But I can mention a few things that we're looking into. One is a new iteration of the block list. So we're working on making it more scalable so that we can be better prepared for future blocks. So we're working on a different kind of storage. It's going to be much more efficient in terms of size. And that's a pretty big project that requires work both on the client and the server side. And we're also trying to get that done for the next CSR, which is 78, I want to say, which is pretty close. I think that hits nightly on April. So we need to get a lot of stuff aligned for that to happen. So while it's not guaranteed that we're going to make that deadline, we're trying to reach it, and so far things seem to be on track. Another thing that's interesting that we're looking into is finding a way for users who are moving from Chrome to Firefox to be able to port their extensions that they have installed. That's trickier than it sounds because, well, so the extensions that you have in Chrome don't have like a direct mapping to the extensions that we have available for Firefox. So we're looking into ways to make that connection from at least the most popular Chrome extensions to the recommended extensions that we have on AMO. And we're also looking into using things like search API to make recommendations for similar or maybe even the same extension in Firefox. And then we have a few smaller things. We're looking into how we're dealing with account deletions because AMO uses Firefox accounts, and Firefox accounts has this kind of delete all kind of deal that it's complicated. Like in general, it's easy for a user to do that because they don't have a lot of data that they wouldn't be able to reproduce. But in the case of AMO, that's different. And we also need to retain certain things like add-on files for security purposes. So we're figuring out how that's going to work on the AMO side. Basically, Firefox accounts tells AMO, this account was deleted and we should do something about it. And right now we're not. And the idea is that we should do something, and what that something is what we're discussing. We have a couple of Google Summer of Code projects. We have one for a homepage curation tool. So our homepage is a little bit customizable. We want it to be more fully customizable. So that's one of the projects, basically having a better backend for making changes to the modules in the homepage. We have one for Extension Workshop. And then we have another one for the Extension Activity Monitor. So that'd be creating a prototype for how a Firefox tool would look, where you are able to kind of monitor the activity that your extensions, basically what your extensions are doing, kind of like the connections they're making, the pages they're making changes to, and that kind of stuff. So the idea is that we would enable more advanced users to kind of look into what their extensions are doing and report like suspicious activity. There was some preliminary work done last year to log some of this information. So this is more creating like the prototype for the UX for that. And yeah, I think that covers kind of the highlights of what we're working on. I guess I can add that we're also still working on sideloading, basically removing a bunch of different ways in which extensions can be dropped into users' Firefox installations in ways that they can't really remove them very easily. So the idea is to eliminate that moving forward. So there's this whole process, this whole transition process when we're moving from where we are now into a world where pretty much all extensions can be easily uninstalled, and that there aren't many ways to surprise users with extensions that they didn't expect.
Yeah, and we've had some interesting conversations with some folks who are developers of extensions that had been sideloaded in the past. So somebody had asked for guidance about how to programmatically move the extension from the install in the registry to the profile. Generally speaking, we're fine with that. Although we did want to note that the extension, we're not turning off extensions that had previously been sideloaded. We're just making it easier for users to remove them. And developers of sideloaded extensions will still be able to update the extensions that are installed in the registry going forward. So we're not doing anything to get rid of that. Although it does kind of create two different update paths that you have to do for the extension that's installed in the profile and the extension that's installed in the registry. So it might actually be easier to kind of just move it into the profile.
Yep. Yeah, there's a bunch of tricky details there. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for developers, but there's a lot of legacy stuff there that we can't avoid.
Yeah, totally. Well, great. Well, thanks, Jorge. And Shane, if you're able to talk a little bit, I was just wondering if we could touch base a little bit about the CSP policy, just because we've had, so we have the new CSP right now that's behind the pref, and that landed, I think, in December. Hey, Shane. Just following up, because I know that we had I saw two questions about it recently. So, so we know that there's a Chrome parity bug. Actually, I'm not sure if that was about CSP. I'm sorry, I just threw you in here. Talk about CSP, Shane.
I'm doing some more work on CSP right now, and the essence of kind of what we're doing is kind of a two-pronged thing. One is that you would be able to add, you would be able to use the manifest v3 format for CSP to apply CSP onto content scripts. And that is the way that it will end up working. And we've got that in there so that extension developers can test how that CSP will apply to their add-ons. How is it going to affect what they're currently doing? Some of the work that I'm doing right now is to clean that up a bit, because if you turn that on, it applies to all add-ons you have installed. And the change that I'm working on is to make it apply to only the add-on that you're testing with the new format. As well as after the prior work was done, more details about how Google is implementing it came out. So some of the changes will be updating to match that. Another thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to collect data against V2 add-ons. So we're going to have a report mechanism that we can get data on how the V3 CSP, default CSP would affect existing add-ons, because we want to see how, how those might break. Are there going to be workarounds for add-on developers to make things work? Or are we going to end up breaking something that there's just no way to do? And just so that we can kind of go into it with our eyes open, understanding what the effects are and being able to help developers figure out what their path is.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there was the person, sorry, I'm just bugging you because I've got you here. So the person who was wondering about bug 1462989 and saying the only workaround is completely disable CSP via security CSP enable. Is that one of the, is that an expected outcome?
So this particular bug is actually unrelated to the manifest v3 CSP work.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, this is about the web request API applying or modifying CSP on a request as the request is coming through.
Okay.
And so add-ons like ad blockers will do this. They'll make the CSP more strict in order to kind of alleviate some of the work they have to do. And so there were a couple of issues and a couple of differences, a couple of issues with how we implemented it in the kind of header modifications, and a couple of differences between Firefox and Chrome and how that's done. So the patch that is in here, let me see. You're making me think early in the morning.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so this bug discussed kind of general mechanisms around header modification on request and about whether headers should be merged or not, rather than doing a more general approach. I wanted to be conservative in what we were doing and just apply it for content security policy headers right now, because all you can do is make it more strict in the general sense. So now, basically, what will happen with this patch is that, and this is what didn't work before, is that two add-ons can actually modify the CSP on a request, and that modification will get merged rather than only one of those applying. And that was kind of the problem that was being illustrated in the bug, was a couple of different ad blockers or security add-ons would try and apply CSP to the same request, and only one would work.
Okay.
So we wanted to fix that use case.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for explaining that. Definitely appreciate it. And then I saw that we've got a couple interesting bugs landing for Firefox 74. I think next week is the release. So it looks like there's going to be an update that lets you unset a shortcut on commands, and also making the web request URL classification part of the public API. So Philip's working on a blog post about that, and hopefully that blog post will go out pretty soon. Anything else interesting happening on the Firefox platform? Other than everything is interesting? No, we're still working on some manifest v3 stuff.
Lots of work to do there.
Lots of work to do. Okay. Sounds good. And then Andreas, how's it going with add-on security?
Doing good. We're secure. I'm done.
Great.
We actually did some quite significant work just a couple of weeks ago, or last week, if I remember correctly. So we got rid of a quite dangerous set of permissions that we had defined on AMO that we were giving to people in the add-ons team. And so we removed that group and made sure that we limit the necessary access to as few people as possible. So for that, AMO is now a lot safer, and I wanted to make that change for actually quite some time, and I'm happy it's finally done now. So far, it hasn't created many issues, I think. There's a few things related to the review tools, which is not related to this thing, but we also updated the permissions for review tools, actually to rule out a few edge cases. But we ran into other edge cases, so we're now looking into which ones we can fix the easiest. We will see how that goes. On a brighter note, we're currently discussing the timeline of when we can shut down the old file viewer in the review tools. As some of you might know, we have had quite a new tool for quite some time, which is called the Code Manager. It's nice and shiny. It has quite a much better usability than the old one, I think. It should be a lot snappier. There are still a few performance things we're looking into and we'd like to fix. And there's still a bit of background work to be done for the Code Manager to recognize all the add-on files. So that's currently ongoing, but we are planning to decommission the old file viewer in the next couple of, if I say months, then it sounds really long, but like in the next very, very few months. So probably
by the end of H1, maybe? Is that reasonable?
Hopefully way before that. So
okay.
The initial plan was to do that before the end of this quarter, before the end of Q1. But there's other priorities, like Jorge mentioned, the work on the new block list. And that has a couple of dependencies, or that has a couple of related projects that have the dependencies. So we're stretched a little bit on prioritizing because everything is important. So we have to make decision on what gets the most priority. And the Code Manager has a high priority, but it might not have the highest, which is fine because we still have the old file viewer, but we still want to get the project done or wrap the project up and finally shut down the old file viewer and remove the code. So hopefully, I would assume maybe March, maybe April, we should be able to finish this. And then we can also delete off very old legacy code from the server, which is also very nice.
Awesome. Andreas had also shared the 2020 State of the Malware report by Malwarebytes. I haven't had a chance to take a look at it, but I think it talks a little bit about browsers.
Yeah, it's a very long report. It's still quite interesting to read. I also haven't read it completely. I just read the interesting to me parts of the report. It highlights a few attack vectors specifically about browser extensions. So it seems that malicious extensions are more used on Mac than they are used on other platforms to achieve the same goal. So we're looking into that. We're seeing whether we can identify something from that. But generally, it is quite interesting to see that on Windows, for example, malicious developers reside to other things than browser extensions, where on Mac, the easiest way for them seems to be just installing a malicious add-on.
Fascinating. Actually, that is super interesting. Well, cool. So yeah, give that a read if you've got some spare time this week and you're interested in the state of the malware. So that was it for all of the things that I had wanted to talk about today. Are there any questions or anything anyone wants to bring up? Okay, super cool. If anything does come to mind, please feel free to send a message or post a new topic on our forums. That's probably the best way of getting on, getting any concerns on our radar. Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.